Hey guys, today we're looking back at some of your favourite malicious compliance stories from this year. Why do managers always feel the need to change things that aren't broke? And how do they always manage to break the one critical thing that will nuke the entire company? Well, today we have a classic. No one leaves till 5 PM, but no overtime? Bet. Posted by Alrus. Several years ago, I worked for an aerospace manufacturing company as a setup operator, meaning my job was to arrive before the shift started, usually 3 or 4 hours early, to make sure that all 5 axis mills were calibrated, the ATC magazines were all loaded correctly, and the tooling was in good condition, nothing dulled or broken. After being there for several years, the company eventually got acquired, and new management came in. I'm there from 3 or 4 in the morning until 1 to 2 PM, sometimes earlier if a new job gets added to the floor. The schedule works fine for me. I get to beat the traffic both ways, and the pay is a bit higher due to the differential. After a few weeks, it gets noticed that I constantly leave early and always run over on hours, so management implements a new policy. Work starts at 9 AM and runs until 5 PM. You have to be on the floor and ready to go when the clock hits 9 AM. I try explaining to my boss exactly why I leave early, but he's more concerned about numbers and cash flow than what I actually do there. So fine. You want 9 to 5? I'll work 9 to 5. Instead of clocking in at 4, I chill in my car until 8:45, roll into the building, and wait until exactly 9 to clock in, then head to the floor. I roll up to the first machine and hit the E-stop, which shuts it down instantly. I tell the operator that it hasn't been set up and they need to wait until it's ready. I head down the line, switching off each machine as I go, telling the operators the same thing. It's not ready, go wait. I start at the end of the line, calibrating the entire magazine, verifying everything in there is in spec and ready to be used, taking my sweet ass time. Meanwhile, the rest of the line is dead in the water. Nobody can do any work until the deck passes calibration and is certified to be used. I'm partway through the second unit when the new manager comes breathing down my neck. Why is nothing running? What's going on? Etc, etc. I sit back on my haunches and calmly explain to him that this is my job, the one that, until today, I used to come in hours early to do, so as to not mess with the production schedule. It needs to get done. Everything should be ready to start in about another 5 to 6 hours, boss. I'm told to unlock the machines and get the line moving. No can do, boss. None of these machines are checked, and I'm not signing off on the certification until I'm done. Anything not certified is an instant QC reject. Choose, either run the line and reject $1 million in parts, or let me finish and lose $1 million in production time, and I go back to my old schedule tomorrow. The plant got a day paid to do nothing. I got the new boss off my back, and he got reamed to all hell for losing a day's production. Yeah, he's never gonna mess with OP again. If you ever have a bad day at work, just remember, this guy lost the company $1 million. Manager gets me fired, doesn't realize there's a paper trail. Posted by Powder Toe Supreme. I worked as a writer and editor for over a decade, and in that time, I had my fair share of bad bosses, like anyone. But there was one that completely takes the cake. I worked for a large media company that had dealings with a number of other companies, ranging from publishing to fashion to sport to tech. You name it, they did it. How a writing department worked was each writer had specific areas that they would write for, kind of how like journals have beats they cover. So if you were assigned to the fashion arm of the company, you wrote and edited everything for that arm. I worked for this company for about a year and a half before a new manager was hired. Part of her job was to update our internal style guide when necessary. For those that don't know, a style guide is a reference document for how to either refer to things or how to format things for a company. Before her tenure as manager, this was only done once, maybe twice a year, and the changes were relatively minimal, since the style guide was very well established in the company and had been in place for a number of years. However, after she came on, it was being updated at least once a week, if not multiple times a week. It legitimately became an obsession for her. Aside from the general annoyance of keeping up with it, it didn't take long for me and my coworkers to reach the conclusion that our new manager didn't have the faintest idea what she was doing. Each new version had more and more glaring errors. At first, we ignored these changes, giving her the benefit of the doubt and hoping, perhaps naively, that these new directives were mistakes. That was until people started getting reprimanded for not following the style guide. I was the first one to get the one-on-one closed-door talk. One of the departments I wrote for was sports. She had seen how I hadn't been following the new rule of how I was supposed to refer to men's and women's teams. Truthfully, I had willfully ignored it, hoping that it was just a mistake. But, to my horror, it appeared that my new writing manager didn't understand basic grammar. You see, the change she implemented removed the apostrophe from men's and women's, for example, in men's basketball. Her rationale was that the men didn't own the team, therefore it should not be possessive. Apparently her understanding of the English language didn't evolve past grade school explanations. I was honestly pretty dumbfounded at first, but once I got over the initial shock that the manager of our department didn't realise that men's was not a word, I tried to bleakly explain that men is already plural, and that a possessive S doesn't always denote direct ownership, i.e. men's bathroom. She stared blankly at me for a few seconds, and for the briefest of moments, I thought that maybe, I was starting to see the cogs in her head turn. But no, she doubled down. Realising the fight was lost, I told her that I would implement the changes going forward. Now, here's where my malicious compliance comes in. We worked for and with some very high-profile companies, and mistakes were not tolerated for things that were outward-facing. Realising her idiocy could cost me my job, I made a very simple request. Could you please email me the exact style guide rule you're referencing, and how exactly you'd like me to implement it, with examples of where I messed up? She looked at me like I was stupid for not understanding what was being asked of me, but she still wrote it all down and emailed it to me. I also made sure any further style changes were referenced in an email and specifically asked that if there were any further changes, to please cite how I had done them in the past, along with how she'd like them to be done in the future. Sure enough, within the next 6 months, I was fired. At my exit interview, I handed HR a folder containing every bit of written communication regarding the style changes, along with quite a bit of evidence that she was passing off her projects to other members of the department and changing people's work behind their back. She was fired 3 months after me, along with our department director 3 months after that. Turns out, my little folder sparked a full investigation by HR. And after interviewing other coworkers, they realised that she'd done it to have the grounds to fire people she didn't like. I just happened to be the first on the chopping block. The project she was passing off to other people, she was taking the credit for what they were doing to make herself look good. And those changes she was making to other people's work, HR realised that she was changing things to make it explicitly incorrect. Gotta love software that tracks changes and timestamps and lists the user. On top of all of this, they also discovered that she had, at best, exaggerated, and at worst, fabricated most of her resume. By the time she was fired, I'd already found another job in a different department at the same company. It was a good gig, and my new manager wasn't a complete moron. Eventually, I moved on from that company, but if anything, my time there taught me a very valuable lesson. Document, 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 and document some more. Down in the comments, DNA is just neutered RNA says, always ask for the email, and you must take actions to prepare for when they cut your email access. Don't be this guy. My boss is corrupt, and I have email proof. Show me the email. I can't. They fired me and cut my email access. Yep, always get it in writing, and make sure they can't restrict your access to the proof. You wanted 0 idle time in Teams? Okay, we can do that. Posted by the Lightning Count 1. This story is from a few years ago. It's how I helped my sister, and somehow got her company to willingly bypass their own idle time requirements. Her company went work from home after the lockdown and stayed working from home. At first, they required an always-on camera system, but that quickly went away as the amount of unintended nudity that comes from your average household is quite startling. Then they went to a system that tracks your idle time in Teams. The amount of write-ups, meetings, group meetings, and eventual terminations for what was the dumbest requirement ever caused my sister to ask for help. She sent me an Amazon link for one of those UBS sticks that jiggles the mouse. I told her, don't use those, as even the laziest IT can detect them. At the time, Amazon wasn't selling mechanical mouse turners yet, or at least, not at a reasonable price, so I looked at building one. I found an STL file for this flowery mouse holder, which I modified to be just straight monocolored, and 3D printed it. I cut out a 1.5-inch circular disc and put it on a weak motor. I then connected it to a power source through a USB. I set the wheel to spin every 1 to 12 seconds for a total of 2 to 5 seconds at a time, but ran into an issue. Sometimes the disc spinning wouldn't actually move the mouse. I found a company that would print stickers at $1 a sticker, so I found this basic pattern of squares and lines crisscrossing each other and had it printed to just under the dimensions of the disc. I stuck it on there and the mouse turner worked perfectly. But I quickly ran into another issue. Since the disc was raised, it quickly got hung up on the mouse with a sticker. So back into design I went. I made it so the dimensions were slightly larger for the base and sat it where the disc would be 2mm below the actual mouse. After printing it, the mouse sat on the cradle and the disc spun without touching. When the disc spun, the mouse cursor would just randomly move in weird directions. So with all that out of the way, I got my free lunch out of my sister and delivered it. It hooked into a laptop's UPS port, undetected, and would move her cursor, decreasing her idle time down to 0. Within 2 weeks, she was recognised as a top performer. She was watching crime dramas with her volume at maximum until she got a notification that a customer submitted a request. In other words, her productivity remained exactly the same. So my sister called me up and asked if I could make more of those. Thankfully, I'd saved the STL files and could order more stickers if needed. I told her I could make each one for $25. The cheapest on Amazon at the time were like $50, and it only cost me roughly $12 to make them, which went down to about $8 by the end. She said several coworkers had asked her about it and should just give them my number. Within a month, I had sold 32 mechanical mouse turners. Then, one weekend, I got a call from the CEO of the company. You see, all of his workers were using these mouse turners, and he wasn't. So, when the company published the report on idle times, his was abysmally low. That phone call was one of the most surreal phone calls I've ever had. At first he thought I was one of his employees. I told him that I wasn't, that I worked for a waste management company. I don't, but I wasn't about to tell him that. He asked me about the mouse turners. I told him that I designed them for a friend, but that person no longer works for his company. Again, lies. I was protecting my sister. Not like he couldn't figure it out anyway, but still. He then asked if he could get one. This is where the conversation became very weird. I tried to convince him to give up the idle time requirements, as it clearly wasn't important and only hurt his company. I laid out all of my points and pointed out that even he, the CEO of the company, is buying a device specifically designed to bypass his own requirement. But he wouldn't budge. He was so into his company dogma that he just wanted one from me. I had a few left over, so I told him I could make him one for $35. Now, here's the really screwed up part of the story. He asked for a full list of my clients. He promised that no one would be fired, he just wanted to know how many there were. I told him that the list wouldn't be necessary, as every single one of his employees had bought one, literally all 32, excluding him. His response was to have the company reimburse the employees the $25 they'd paid, and set it up where his company would purchase a device from me each time a new employee was hired. So, first the company set idle time requirements, which then caused issues at the company. Now the company buys devices for each employee, so they can bypass their own idle timer. Corporate logic at its finest. Congrats! You've solved the problem that you created in the first place, by costing the company even more money. Initially I thought OP's sister was being a bit silly by telling her coworkers about the device. Like, what if they reported her? But hey, apparently everyone at that company is cool, even the CEO. It's just whoever's in charge of making those dumb policies. Probably the board or something. My boss demanded I serve all customers and fill all shelves, no matter how far past closing hours it was. Posted by Spooks McBeef. So, the first job I ever worked at was a grocery retail store, which had several different departments, including a deli for lunch meat and cheeses, which is where I worked. One night I was working from 1 to 9 PM. 9 PM is when the deli and other specialist departments closed, and were expected to be done and clocked out, but the rest of the store remained open 24/7 for general groceries. So, one night, it was just me and one other guy. We'd had an especially busy night, and were a little behind on our cleaning as a result, but we had our meat slicing machines already coated with sanitizer after working for 15 minutes to get all the little chunks of meat out of every corner. We were pretty serious about making sure those things were as clean as can be. It was about 8:55 at this point. We were already running late, and the store we worked for did not like overtime. If you had any amount of overtime, you'd get chewed out for it the next day, even for a little amount. So, a woman came up to the counter and began looking through the product. We had a glass case filled with a bunch of different types of lunch meats, pre-sliced and ready to go for bagging up. She looked at one and said, "I want this turkey right here, but I want it freshly sliced." The 2 slices we had were still covered in sanitizer and were drying. As per food safety protocol, we have to allow 20 minutes minimum for the sanitizer to dry. I told her, "Well, ma'am, we really can't do that right now. Our slices are both being cleaned at the moment, as the department closes in 5 minutes, but I'd be glad to get you something from here, from our cold case." "So, you're not gonna slice it fresh for me? That's what you're saying?" I replied, "That's correct, I apologise." Without another word, she walked away, and me and my coworker went back to what we were doing. We finished cleaning and went home about 5 minutes later, narrowly clocking out on time. Fast forward 2 days later, me and the same coworker came in and got to work like any normal day. At about 3 PM, 2 hours into my shift, I got personally called into the head honcho's office. I thought nothing of it and headed upstairs. The store director handed me a piece of paper and said, "Tell me what caused this." I looked at the paper. It was a printed out screenshot of a Google review for our store. 1 out of 5 star. And a full paragraph from that lady from 2 nights ago, complaining that she didn't get her freshly sliced meat from the rude employee, and then specifically described me. I explained exactly what happened 2 nights prior, as clear as I'm typing out here. The director was getting heated, and began cutting me off while I was speaking, asking, "Why would the slices be covered in sanitizer at 8:55? You're scheduled to work until 9 PM. I said, "Yes, I am, but since I'm constantly being reminded to not get any overtime, I usually start cleaning them about 8:30. The director got even more upset and raised her voice. "I don't care! That's not how it works! If you have a customer, you serve them. And you'd better start making sure those shelves are filled before you leave, or you won't be working here anymore. Now get out!" I was pretty salty at this point. I went back down to the department and my coworker asked, "What happened?" I told him and he said, "So, they want everything done before we leave?" I said, "Yep," and without another word, he knew exactly what we needed to do. 9 PM hits, and our shelves, as usual, are only half full. But since we've been given this new standard, we decided to stay and make sure we did as I was instructed to do. We spent hours slicing and slicing and slicing until every single tray of meat and cheese was full. We had plastic totes in the big fridge, full of cheese that we sliced, that were wrapped up in half-pound blocks for ease of sale. So we decided to fill that tub over the brim with every single type of cheese we had available. We cut up 700 pounds of cheese and wrapped it up in the fridge. We also had a Subway-style sandwich counter where we made sandwiches to order and also pre-made on the shelves for sale. We made double the usual amount of sandwiches and filled the shelves as requested. By the time we were done, not a single shelf had an empty spot left on it. After every single possible item on the shelf was as full as it could be, we finally started to clean and close. It was about 3 AM when we finally left. The department opens at 5 AM. We were exhausted, but our spiteful overtime venture made us feel pretty good. We got about 6 hours of overtime in, and they hated anyone getting even 5 to 10 minutes of overtime. We both came in the next day at 1 PM as usual, expecting complete retaliation. But no. Instead, our department manager of the deli came over to us and said, "Hey, you should be good to start cleaning up about 8:30 as usual. I think she, the director, got the point you made." Normally overtime would be taken care of by making us clock out for lunches or come in later than usual, but they let us keep all 6 hours of that overtime. They never said anything about overtime ever again after that, and about 6 months later, I accepted a job offer that paid almost double, and I never went back into retail hell ever again. So, back in my old hospitality days, I worked in a cafe, and the machine would take time to clean, just like in OP's story. But we were always scheduled for our shift to end at the same time the cafe closed. And we didn't even get overtime, you just weren't paid past closing hours. And just like with OP, the owner somehow expected us to still be making coffees till the last minute of opening hours, and then magically clean the store and close up instantaneously. Obviously, they knew that wasn't actually possible, they just wanted free labor out of us. So we did what OP did, shut things down and start cleaning 30 minutes before closing hours, and told customers that we couldn't serve coffees anymore. The owner knew this and would literally call the store 5 minutes before close and pretend to be a customer ordering a coffee to try to catch us out, as if we couldn't recognize his voice. "You really want me to go home? Okay, lose a client." Posted by Wise Reply 2377. So this is a funny story where I know I wasn't exactly in the right, but was still malicious compliance. I'm a software engineer and I'm a gal. So, as you can imagine, I'm always either the only or one of the very, very few non-males in the team. This malicious compliance is from a previous job of mine. I was a primary software engineer on a project. One day, we had a meeting scheduled with a client. This was a large company, and the client was in a different country, so the meeting was scheduled virtually. Now, if you know anything about me, you know I'm kind of promiscuous, and I guess this day I was being a bit silly and wore a dress that was a teeny bit too short. At lunch, I was told by my manager that someone had complained and I need to go home and change. I knew I was wrong and immediately apologised, but I brought up the meeting that I had coming up. Now, as per company policy, we couldn't take home any company equipment unless it was scheduled on call, or unless we had permission. I couldn't take this call from home without a computer laptop as I need to demo something, and none of the other engineers on my team could manage the demo. Yes, they knew how it worked, but no one knew it as well as me. They had to refer to manuals to do the demo and answer questions, which isn't a great presentation for the client. So, I offered 2 solutions. 1, I get to take the company laptop home for the night. Or 2, I sit in one of the conference rooms for the next hour and a half and then join the meeting from that room. I was told that neither was an option. I either had to go home and then return after changing, or go home, join in the call via phone and let a teammate present. I explained why I needed to present, and my manager said that I should change and come back. There's no way I could do that and still make the meeting. I made that clear. So he said I could take a half day off out of my unlimited medical leave if I came back because he knew how important the client was. I once again suggested that I take the company laptop home. I'd done it multiple times when I was on call, so it wasn't a trust issue. He said no, that's only when you can't take a call from the office. I gave it one more shot, explaining that even if I went home and left right away, I would miss most of the call, but he didn't care. He said he'd take care of the call until I returned. I said, okay, and put in for the half day off along with an email confirming what we discussed and then headed home. I was obviously not in a rush. I got home, changed, and went back to the office. As soon as I left home, I started receiving frantic calls asking where I was. I explained that it'd take me about 45 minutes to reach the office if traffic allowed, and they should start the call. Bottom line, no one was prepared, everyone freaked out and made a mess of the presentation. The client wasn't impressed and didn't move forward with any further projects. So yes, I messed up, but I was willing to make up for it. My manager didn't listen to me, so I did exactly what he wanted. Could I have stopped at a mall 5 minutes away and picked up leggings? Yes. Did I choose to follow his instructions instead? Also yes. I want to clarify the problem wasn't with my outfit being too short for the meeting. If the meeting had happened before the complaint reached my manager, I'd have gone home and taken the L on the half day. But the problem came because I had to attend the meeting, and they just had to enforce their punishment on me. Outcome: the manager tried to blame me, but I simply reminded him that I told him about the issue and emailed him the discussion of our meeting. I had explicitly told him this would happen if he sent me home to change, but he said he'd handle it. At least he didn't try to claim that that didn't happen, but after that, he insisted that everyone must be fully involved in all projects, which meant a lot more meetings and a lot less work getting done, making all our lives harder. So I quit not long after that, as did many others because it was affecting bonuses too. Down in the comments, Ada Clubs 343 says, "So your dress was too short for a virtual meeting where mostly only your face would be visible to the client?" And rather than them just sucking it up for a day, they lost the client because they sent away the only person who actually knew what was going on. I get that dress code is a thing at offices, but if this client was so important, I think they could have just left it at come back tomorrow with appropriate clothing, instead of leave and come back. Well done on the malicious compliance, their fault for not being prepared. Boss didn't like the look of the bulk mailing stamp, told me to remove it, cost the company over $220,000. Posted by Bright Rick. Back in the 1980s, I worked for a sporting goods company as a catalog designer. Small company, privately owned. I was the entire advertising department. I created 4 catalogs a year. These were responsible for most of our mail order sales, pre-internet, to the tune of about $700,000 a year. We sent the catalogs by bulk mail using a mailing service. This allowed us to send them at a heavily discounted rate. To do this, we needed to use the bulk mail permit and place the permit info on the mailing area of the catalog. Enter a new boss. Let's call him Ron. I was the number one, the only one in my department. For some reason, the company owner hired Ron as a favor to a friend. From day one, he was micromanaging, questioning everything, and screwing up my very tight schedule. This was before computers were common. Everything was done by hand, literally typing out copy and reducing it onto a photocopier to fit, developing the photo film myself, making prints, etc. The actual printer had to add screens to the photos so it'd print, burn metal plates, and so on, all time consuming and very expensive. Deadlines could not be missed, so I was stuck with several 16-hour days come crunch time. I did complain to the owner, but he really couldn't care less. I really wanted to stick it to Ron, and then the opportunity presented itself. The constant threats of, "my way or you're fired," were getting to me. The latest pre-summer catalog was done. Summer was our big season. I had to give him my mock-up, photocopied sheets stapled together, of the final catalog for his approval. A new step added after he demanded it. He looked at it and sent it back with several pointless revisions. And a note to remove that ugly permit box because it wasn't needed. Where he'd worked previously, they'd stuffed their mail into envelopes. The envelopes had the permit, but the mailer did this last step. I simply asked him to initial the changes, as this was the final approved version and was going to the printer the next day. There was no time to check it again, so he did. I knew it'd be a total mess, and it was something that I would never have done in the past. 50,000 catalogs printed and shipped directly to the mailer. The day they arrived at the mailer, the boss gets a call from the sales rep. "We can't mail your catalogs." Boss storms into my area of the building and is literally screaming. Ron is now pissed and yelling at me, joined by the boss. I swear, spittle and froth, vein bulging screaming. Minimum 2-week delay, wasted money, lost sales. I explained what happened. They threatened to fire me. And then, I showed the owner the changes to the final copy, initialed by Ron. He was going to give Ron a second chance. Until the bill came in from the printer. They had to stamp 50,000 catalogs by hand. We had to rent their permit since that was what was on their stamp. Rental and labor was almost $8,000. Adjusted for inflation, that's $20,000. Plus, our early summer sales boost was off by almost $50,000 from previous years, or $200,000 adjusted for inflation. Ron was fired, and I was left alone after that. Down in the comments, Jaimio says, It's truly amazing how many people don't realize that "can I have that in writing" is code for "you effed up and I'm keeping the receipts." Won't let me correct a spelling mistake? Good luck getting me to pay. Posted by "no thanks, I'm all good." Reading another malicious compliance about phone companies remind me of this. This was a good many years ago now. My husband's phone bill had a spelling mistake. Never really paid attention to it. Never really caused any issues. Until it did, of course. The mistake was simple. Think Rod William instead of Rod Williams. So one day we moved states and put in for mail redirection. Now, where I'm from, mail redirections have to be exact, so the bill never got forwarded. And with all that goes along with moving, it didn't even cross our minds that the bill hadn't arrived or been paid. And then, inevitably, the phone got cut off. Once we realised we were all set to fix it up, pay the bill, change our address, etc. But no, can't be that simple. You see, to change the spelling mistake, we need to provide proof of my husband's correct name. But for any name change, they need name change documents, such as a wedding certificate or another official name change document, which he doesn't have as it's not a name change, just a spelling mistake. For some reason, his license and passport wasn't good enough. We asked what we can do to get this fixed, and they offer no help or resolution, just stonewalling that there's no possible way to fix the incorrect spelling. Okay, cool. At this point, we're all cranky. Not gonna help us with what should be a simple fix? We won't pay the bill, we told them. They respond with details of the contract and our obligations, debt collector threats, etc. We simply reply, "Who are you gonna go after?" They replied, "You, of course." My husband, looking comically confused, said, "But my name is not Rod William, and I'm not gonna pay his bill. Good luck finding him. If you happen to send me my own bill though, I'd be happy to pay that." Shocked face, and oh look, spelling mistake gets corrected immediately. Down in the comments, Kookaburra says, "Rule number 1 in problem solving, you have to make it their problem." Jack Summock says, "I still enjoy that line from those fools over at Wall Street Bets. Owe someone $10,000? That's your problem. Owe someone $10 million? That's the bank's problem." Sometimes doing what you're told pays, but you should always be careful with the timing. In the next video, Opie tries to redeem a BJ coupon during an argument. It doesn't go well. Thanks for watching.